recommendations. Jeff?
Well, thank you, Sean. First, to the commissioner from Burlington County, Linda, that was an outstanding presentation. And I was taking notes as you were speaking. That was outstanding. I look forward to getting together with you to talk about some of the initiatives in the Burlington County Park system. As Sean mentioned, I did write an editorial in support of the GCL, and that stands for Gloucester Camden Line. It is a project that has been talked about for almost 20 years, and it appears that it is now moving to the next stage, which is preliminary engineering. I was involved in this in 2005. At that time, there was a discussion about bringing a rail system to Gloucester to connect Camden City or Philadelphia to Rowan University in Glassboro. And when when you review the rail systems that existed in not only the Delaware Valley, but throughout the state of New Jersey, you look at Southeast Pennsylvania, and there is a spider web of rails that stretch throughout Southeast Pennsylvania through the SEPTA system. And that is the primary mode of transportation for most commuters going to and from Philadelphia or even to some of the suburbs. When you look at North Jersey and the PATH system, you see a spider web of rail systems that stretch throughout all of the North Jersey suburbs and reach into New York City. That is the primary means of transportation for many people. When you look at South Jersey and the spider web, there is no spider web in South Jersey. The rail is strictly a PATCO system, a one vein, and a hardly used New Jersey transit line that runs from 30th Street Station to Atlantic City. And that is a single track system, so it can never be a commuter train because you can't run two trains at one time on one track. So there was a push back in 2005 under the Corzine administration to take a hard look at whether there should be a rail system in southern New Jersey to complement the PATCO system. And at that time, they did what's called an alternatives analysis. An alternatives analysis would take a look both in engineering and in practicality, what is the best way to create a system if you were going to do so. And when that process started, I assumed that they would conclude that a line would run right down Route 42. Route 42, believe it or not, is the third most heavily congested traffic highway in the state of New Jersey, and that includes some of the highways that lead to New York City. And if you live or commute by way of Route 42, you can understand why that is a terrible problem. Secondly, the air quality in this region. There are 21 separate regions throughout the country where they measure air quality, and there are a host of different factors involved in that. Our region is ranked worst in the entire country for air quality. And that that includes Philadelphia, it includes Camden County, and stretches to some of the surrounding counties, including Burlington County. The air quality is just unacceptably horrible. And that's not only because of incineration, it's because of the highways that run to and from perpendicular and parallel throughout the Philadelphia region, and the prevailing winds blow from the Philadelphia region into southern New Jersey. And that is, and the fact that we don't have a rail system and getting people out of the cars is clearly just unacceptable. So when they did this alternatives analysis, I assumed it was going to run down Route 42. And what the engineers found through this analysis is that the most beneficial route would be on the existing Conrail right-of-way that cuts through some of the towns, because that would bring more new riders, people, not people moving from PATCO to a GCL line. It would bring more new riders to the system. It would take more people out of their cars. And to be quite frank, it would be a less expensive rail system to build. So that's what the alternative analysis decided. 16,000 riders based on this analysis, would take the light rail line. So the next stage for this project would is preliminary engineering. And the SJTA, South Jersey Transportation Authority, has authorized $25 million to begin preliminary engineering. And what is really critical about the preliminary engineering process is that they identify the type of vehicle that would make up a light rail. Under the existing plan, it would be a diesel rail, which is what you see at the river line, and that is the standard technology today and at the time. But we are finding now that there are new exciting developments in light rail systems that could be either hydrogen or electric lines, and that they would run as efficiently as a diesel line. So my greatest hope is that when they explore the different options, that they would find something other than diesel to operate these trains. The timeline, there are several public hearings that have been, that the DRPA and the state have conducted. Those public hearings have been interesting because people have voiced some objection to it, but the benefits to the project and the reason that I have supported this project are really threefold. Number one, it is time for Gloucester County to get into the 21st century in terms of transportation opportunities for commuters. That means that there should be a rail system. We're never going to duplicate what's in Southeast Pennsylvania or even the PATH system, but we do need alternatives to taking our car to get to Philadelphia or to other places to get to work. Number two, the studies have shown that when these rail systems run through the towns, there is an economic benefit. They become economic engines for properties and businesses that surround the towns where the stations are. The studies have shown that. We have seen that in as a consequence of the River Line being built. And those are the primary reasons. We need to reduce our carbon footprint. We need to reverse the trend of making this region the most dangerous, or one of the most dangerous regions for air quality in the country. And one way to do that will be by getting people out of their cars. And it is very interesting. The pandemic has been awful, as all of you know. It's been a nightmare. But the one consequence of this pandemic, with fewer people commuting to work, is that we have seen in the last year a measurable positive difference in the air quality in our region. And that just proves to us that it is the emissions from our vehicles, that Route 42 traffic, that is a major factor in contributing to the air quality issues that we are experiencing.
You know, this is such an environmentally focused crowd, and I think everybody gets that mass transit has a major role to play if we've got any chance of meeting the state's 80 by 50 mandate. It's just, you hit on two important ones. First was traffic on 42, and last week I had to take my 85-year-old mother to get vaccinated down at Rowan, and so we're coming from the Collingswood area, and it took us 50 minutes to get, what is that, 6 miles, 7 miles. And, as a guy who spent a lot of my adult life in New York, South Jersey is now like worse than the Long Island Expressway or the, Brooklyn Queens Expressway ever were. It's getting really bad with the traffic. We have to do something to alleviate this. The other piece is that you hear from some of the opponents is home values. And I kind of laugh because, again, going back to that New York thing, I used to take the railroad out to the Hamptons, and we're talking about like houses worth tens of millions of dollars that have train stations in them, right? Or even Metro North up through Westchester County and into Connecticut, where a lot of my hedge fund clients were. Those are towns like Rye and Scarsdale. We're talking about like multi-million-dollar residential houses, and even here, you look at towns like Haddonfield and Collingswood. Those real estate markets are doing pretty darn well. And a big part of that is they have the mass transit option of the speed line. When I was in college, One summer I was taking classes at Penn, and the speed line in Collingswood is walkable for me. And I was not going to go to class in Penn. I was going to leave the region and go to school in another part of the country. But because I had access to that train, I stayed here in South Jersey. And I think that's a big part of it too, right? The talent. You know, if we're going to educate these kids here, we want to keep them here because that's how, you know, a community continues to thrive, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't want to age myself, but in my generation, people got in their cars and drove. Now, I was from New York too, so I took the subway everywhere. That was the way people got around. When they were building Patco back in the late 60s, there was objections to it. I take all the objections very seriously. People are concerned. If you live near a rail line, you would be concerned. You'd be concerned about crossings, about noise. These are issues that must be addressed during preliminary engineering, absolutely. And I take it seriously. But in my view, the overriding benefit to creating a rail system, both the economic benefits that you've mentioned, Sean, and the benefits to the towns are enormous. And these towns would be well served by these, and the residents of those towns will be well served by a rail system, as we have found in Collingswood and Haddon Township. If you live in those communities where there are two stops, those two towns have their property values have just exploded. You cannot even put a house on the market for a day without getting 10 offers over the asking price.
And that
And the
predates the
lumberyard,
pandemic, right? That's even before the pandemic.
yeah, yeah, and it's sustained today. My daughter lives in Haddon Heights, and she's trying to find a house. She's trying to move to near the train station. She can't find a house there because the houses are just so expensive.
Yeah.
So
The country has more houses less houses on the market than realtors, the entire country. So that,
Ryan, we're going to ask you to stay muted for now. You can post any questions in the chat. Commissioner Nash, we did get one question that I do think is worth responding to. It's from Joel Hetzel, and it's related to the funding for this thing, and that is a big thing, right? We always have to be concerned for you know, what's our debt situation going to be in the future. And Joe's question was, what dedicating funding has been obtained specifically for the GCL? So can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
yeah, right now the South Jersey Transportation Authority is the primary funding source, and they have dedicated $25 million for preliminary engineering, which is the next stage. They do have the capacity to go to the next stage. They do believe that this is going to be a public-private partnership, and perhaps run by New Jersey Transit at the end of the day. So this is a statewide effort. The governor and Senate President Steve Sweeney, both who have been very supportive of this project, have often said, and they are correct, that North Jersey has received, you know, we all pay the funding for New Jersey Transit, the extra funding. Every New Jersey resident pays the same for statewide transportation, but the money has gone to the north. South Jersey has gotten the short end of the stick for transportation funding. That's not to blame prior administrations. It's just the fact that most of the population two-thirds of the population live above exit 7, but we still have not received our fair share. Senate President Sweeney has made it clear that it's time for South Jersey to get its fair share.
Okay. And so I know obviously this is an issue that is important to a lot of people, and there are strong feelings pro, and there are you know, people are right to have their concerns on the other side. What is the best way to work with you in your office going forward?
Well, the project is going to be run through DRPA and SJTA. My sense is that they're going to hire a project manager through a competitive process, and the project manager will be the quarterback. The one thing that we have said from the onset, from the day we started with the alternatives analysis, is that public hearings and transparency is critical, because this is a very expensive project. If people are opposed to it, they have to be heard. We have had over 100 public hearings since 2005. and I've been to many of them. Most recently, the ones have been online, and I've been listening to them. But the best way to do it is you can always communicate with me and my office. I answer my emails personally at my county.
What's your email address? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's jeff.nash@camdencounty.com. And no one answers that for me. I tune in every day or two to respond to those questions, and I'm happy. And basically, I don't get involved in the day-to-day operations or the planning for this. I would pass that along to Mike Venuto, who's the chief engineer at the DRPA, and he's actively working. If they do hire a project manager, obviously there'll be a direct connection to whoever that is, whoever is assigned to the project during the preliminary engineering stages.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you. I want to switch gears quickly, just because I wanted to hit on the county's Office of Sustainability. Mm-hmm. As Isla had mentioned in our last session, we did do a virtual tour of the Lakeline facility, and it's awesome. You know what Chris and Val are doing down there with the hydroponics and some really cutting edge stuff. Vineyards, the tool lending library, the environmental curriculum. Are there any lessons learned? Anything new on the horizon there? Is there anything? A big goal of Tri-County is to try and help replicate the model that's working in Camden County there, to try and help our fellow counties in Gloucester and Burlington move their sustainability offices along. Is there any lesson learned you'd like to share there?
Yeah, we're going to sit down with Burlington County because they have a lot of great ideas. I was taking notes, Linda, and what you're doing is great. You know, the Sustainability Office has been, it was formed about 5 years ago. We're lucky to have Chris be our executive director. He was the sustainability officer at the Philadelphia Zoo, and they do a lot of cool stuff there as well. And he brought that to Camden County. We are working with that office right now on a trail system known as the Link. The Link is a 32-mile trail that they're building from the Ben Franklin Bridge to Winslow Township. And it'll be a multi-use trail that will cut through 17 towns, beginning in Camden. And what's cool about starting at the Ben Franklin Bridge is that you can cross the bridge and get on the Manayunk Trail. So you can actually bike, if you have the strength, from Valley Forge to Winslow Township. And we are actively working on this. We're hoping that with the federal infrastructure bill that they're trying to form, we've been working with Congressman Norcross and Congressman Kim to get a dedicated amount of money to help fund the trail. But that sustainability office is working hand in hand with us to accomplish that trail. That is Camden County's big project right now.
That's awesome. And again, I'm sorry, I'm speeding through some of these. I want to make sure we hit on them. The next one, I just want to touch with you. Last month, or I guess it was earlier this month, you had announced that our planning for the microgrid to power the CCMUA is going to go forward, but going to look to renewables, including some very cool options, and not going to proceed with using the Covanta incinerator. And that was loud applause from everybody on the Tri-County side. That's awesome. Can you talk about what led to that decisioning?
For those who are not familiar with the microgrid, it's a resiliency operation that would provide power to Camden, to emergency services, schools, hospitals, the CCMUA, which is right next door, and to make sure that they are resilient if the grid ever fails in the area. It's an interesting, currently the Covanta, which operates the incinerator, operates a grid which draws 1 million gallons of water from the aquifer every day. And in turn, they produce electricity, which they sell to the grid. The microgrid is a new concept that a company called Compass is overseeing. And rather than using the trash plant to provide the electricity, the steam from the plant to provide electricity, they have figured out how to use renewable resources instead of the incineration to operate that microgrid. That is, once they figured that out, and the technology is more complicated than I'm articulating right now, that if nothing else symbolically, not using that incineration and the emissions from that incinerator is a great benefit to our community. I started off this conversation saying that our air quality is terrible. Well, incineration doesn't help that air quality.
Right.
And to have any project to benefits or to sustain the incinerator just didn't feel right. For environmentalists, it was a nightmare.
Did you hear our
So,
voices? You know,
yeah, your voices, my voices, every voice. I cringed when the project is so important, and creating that electric resiliency is such an important public policy issue. But it didn't feel right that we were using incineration to accomplish that public policy goal. And when they changed the ability to create the microgrid without incineration, it was everyone was very happy.
One of the things, there's a man in the mirror piece of this, I know I personally am responsible for creating a lot of tonnage of trash that goes out. And I'm happy when the DPW guys pick it up on Wednesday morning. It sucks that kids in Camden maybe, not getting we're getting the short end of the stick on that. So food waste reduction is a big piece, right? And so I don't know if I know the county has had some starts to some projects related to food waste reduction, but what I'd like to offer to you is on this call, you have a lot of folks that have some technical background that have already started to do some deep dive in some of the programs across our state related to municipal level composting and things like that. And to the extent you're willing, I'd say reach out to us. We'd love to help share the knowledge we have.
Yeah, I would be very open to having a meeting. If you wanted to help me, Sean, pull together some experts and figure out how we can advance composting in Camden County. I love what Linda's doing in Burlington County. That's a great opportunity. We were hoping that there was a compost facility being built in Gloucester City. That had been it's been on the books for way too long and still has not been accomplished. And now that with the recycling market dramatically changing, I am concerned that people are not going to be, or towns are not going to be encouraged recycling as they were, which was a financial benefit to the towns to keep the recycling materials out of the trash. But now that market has turned dramatically and the price differential could be discouraging recycling, and that concerns me. Composting, of course, would be a great benefit to our community.
All right, that's awesome. I'm going to say thank you so much for joining us, Commissioner Nash. We have to jump to the next subject, but informative. Thank you very much. I'd say let's, to the extent you're willing, let's stay engaged. I think there's a lot of work we all have to do. It's going to take all of us. And thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody, for having me. I really appreciate it.